Snow howled through the Boston streets as a terrified 10-year-old girl clutched two dying puppies against her chest, her tiny body shaking, her eyes searching for mercy that never came, until headlights cut through the storm. A young Marine, haunted by his own battles, stopped that night, and what began as a rescue became a fight against corruption, cruelty, and a system that had forgotten compassion. With his loyal German shepherd by his side, he stood between a child and the darkness of greed, proving that courage and kindness can still bring light to the coldest of nights. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please share it. Leave a comment of hope, and subscribe for more stories. Snow fell sideways through the Boston night, a furious nor'easter sweeping Beacon Hill until the cobblestones glistened like glass under the street lamps. The Grand Rockwell Mansion stood at the corner of Myrtle Street, its tall windows glowing gold against the storm, a beacon of warmth for those who didn't know what hid inside. At the foot of its marble steps, a small girl huddled in the storm, clutching a soggy cardboard box. Her name was Lily Carter, 10 years old and barely over 4 feet tall, with tangled chestnut hair plastered to her pale cheeks. She wore a faded red coat, 2 sizes too big, cinched with a piece of twine. Her hands, pink and raw from the cold, trembled as she tried to keep the box from falling apart. Inside were 2 German shepherd puppies, Scout and Daisy, each no bigger than a loaf of bread, gasping for breath in the freezing air. Their tiny chests rose and fell with the fragile rhythm of life slipping away. Lily pressed her cheek to the box, whispering as if her warmth could save them. "Just a little longer, babies. Please." Her voice was barely a thread of sound beneath the howl of the wind. The heavy oak door behind her swung open, spilling yellow light onto the snow. A woman appeared, tall and sharp-edged as a winter icicle. Evelyn Rockwell, mistress of the house, had the beauty of someone who had never known hunger. Her hair, silver blonde and swept into a perfect chignon, gleamed like frost under the chandelier. The emerald velvet gown she wore shimmered with each movement, but her face was as cold as the marble she stood upon. "What are you doing out here, child?" Evelyn's voice was calm, but it carried the quiet precision of a knife's edge. Lily turned, her small shoulders straightening though her knees trembled. "Please, ma'am. They're sick. They just need medicine. I was only trying to—" Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume of jasmine and wine curling through the air like a ghost. "Medicine? You stole from my home, didn't you?" Her tone softened into false pity, the kind that hurt worse than anger. "Theft is an ugly habit, little one, especially from those who have shown you mercy." Behind her stood the housekeeper, Mr. Grant, a narrow man with hollow eyes and a nose red from drink. He said nothing, just looked at Lily with a flicker of sympathy quickly extinguished by fear of his employer. Evelyn gestured with a gloved hand. "Take the box and put it where it belongs." When Mr. Grant reached forward, Lily stepped back, shielding the puppies with her body. "Please don't! They'll die!" For a heartbeat, Evelyn's eyes, gray and glassy, met the girl's, and something like annoyance, not cruelty, passed through them. "Everything dies, child. That's the world's order." Then, with a flick of her hand, she turned away. "Throw her out, Grant, and the animals with her. I won't have sickness under my roof." The door slammed. Lily stumbled down the icy steps, her boots slipping on the slick marble. The snow fell harder, and the wind snatched her sobs into the night. She crouched under a street lamp, curling her small body over the box to block the flakes. The light above her flickered as if uncertain whether to stay. Scout whimpered, a thin sound, while Daisy made none at all. Miles away, on the same storm-lashed streets, a black pickup truck rumbled through the snow. Its headlights carved tunnels of white in the swirling darkness. Behind the wheel sat Ethan Miller, 30 years old, a Marine recently returned from deployment and now stationed at the Boston Naval Yard. He had the kind of face that bore its history plainly: square jaw, a faint scar along his left temple, stubble that refused to be tamed. His dark hair was clipped short, his posture straight even when driving, as if discipline were a habit he couldn't unlearn. There was weariness in his eyes, though, a quiet shadow that came from years of watching good men fall and promises break. Yet beneath it was something unyielding, a kind of strength that waited for purpose. Beside him sat Atlas, his 10-year-old German shepherd, large and regal, his black and tan coat graying around the muzzle. Atlas had been Ethan's military partner, trained to detect explosives and danger. His amber eyes, intelligent and calm, scanned the storm ahead as if measuring threats invisible to human sight. Ethan slowed the truck as Atlas suddenly straightened, muscles tightening. The dog's ears flicked forward and a low growl rumbled in his throat. Ethan glanced over. "Easy, buddy, what is it?" Atlas barked once, sharp and certain, the kind of bark that meant someone needs help. Ethan's hand turned the wheel instinctively, the truck gliding toward the narrow street that cut behind Beacon Hill. The headlights caught a figure crouched beneath a lamppost, a child in a red coat, snow collecting on her hair, a box in her lap. Ethan parked and stepped out, boots crunching on the ice. The cold hit him like a wall, but what froze him was the sight of the girl's small shoulders shaking, the box moving faintly as if it were alive. He approached slowly, voice low and steady. "Hey there, kid. You all right?" Lily flinched, pulling the box closer. Her face lifted, eyes wide and wild. "Please don't take them," she whispered. "They're all I have." Atlas padded forward, head low, tail still. He sniffed the air, then approached the box with deliberate gentleness. His breath steamed in the cold as he leaned down and nuzzled one of the tiny puppies. Scout let out a weak whine, and Atlas responded with a soft, reassuring grunt. Ethan crouched beside the girl. Up close, she looked smaller than he'd thought. Her lips blue from cold. Her lashes clumped with ice. "You're freezing. Come on. We need to get you out of this storm." Lily shook her head. "They're sick. If I move them, they'll die if we stay." Ethan interrupted gently. "My truck's warm. I've got a heater and blankets. Let me help." For a long second, she hesitated, weighing the stranger's voice against the long line of broken promises in her short life. But when Atlas pressed his nose against her knee and gave a low whine, something inside her cracked. She nodded. Ethan lifted the box carefully, feeling the faint flutter of tiny hearts through the cardboard. The warmth of his coat surrounded Lily as he guided her to the truck. Inside, the heater hummed to life, and the cab filled with the smell of wet fur and snow. "Names?" he asked, as he set the box on the seat between them. "Scout and Daisy," she said, clutching her hands together to stop them from shaking. "Good names," Ethan replied, a ghost of a smile touching his face. "I'm Ethan. That's Atlas. He's the boss." Atlas gave a quiet snort as if confirming it. For the first time that night, Lily almost smiled. Outside, the storm raged on, snow swirling like a curtain that sealed them away from the world. Inside the truck, a Marine, a girl, and 3 dogs sat suspended in a fragile cocoon of warmth and breath. Ethan looked at the girl in the rearview mirror. She was staring at the puppies with the fierce concentration of someone who refused to give up. Something in him stirred, a long-buried instinct to protect. He didn't know her story yet, but he knew the look in her eyes. It was the same one he'd seen in 100 war zones, the look of someone who had already lost too much, but still dared to hope. The truck pulled away from the curb, taillights vanishing into the snow. Behind them, the Rockwell mansion's windows glowed bright and empty, indifferent to the night it had cast out. The heater hummed softly inside the old pickup as snow hissed against the windshield. Ethan drove carefully through the slush-covered streets of Boston's South End, glancing occasionally at the small figure wrapped in his jacket beside him. Lily Carter sat rigid, both arms around the cardboard box where the 2 fragile puppies, Scout and Daisy, lay curled in a trembling heap. The girl's eyes never left them, her lips moving silently in prayer or pleading. Ethan couldn't tell which. The storm outside had turned the world into a blur of white and shadow. Inside the truck, time slowed to the rhythm of breath, engine, and heartbeat. Atlas sat upright in the back seat, head slightly tilted, his amber gaze fixed protectively on the girl. He was a massive presence, his black and tan fur glistening with melted snow, his breathing steady. Every so often, he released a low rumble from his chest, not a growl, but a reassurance, a way of telling everyone in that cab that as long as he was there, no harm would pass through the door. Ethan's apartment was not far, just off Tremont Street, a ground-floor unit tucked between 2 aging brick buildings with cracked stoops and flaking paint. When he pulled up, the snow had already begun to thin, falling now like scattered ash. He parked, shut off the engine, and turned to the girl. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "Let's get them warm." Lily hesitated, glancing at the apartment windows. They were dark, expressionless rectangles. "You live here?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Ethan replied, stepping out and opening her door. "It's not much, but the heat works." He led her inside, his boots leaving dark prints on the scuffed hardwood floor. The apartment was sparse but spotless. The walls were bare except for a framed flag folded into a triangle and a photograph of 6 men in desert fatigues, standing shoulder to shoulder in blinding sunlight. In the photo, Ethan looked younger, his eyes brighter. One of the men beside him, smiling wide, had a hand slung over his shoulder. A man named Marcus Hale, Ethan's best friend, who hadn't made it home. The memory flickered through Ethan's mind like a shadow as he closed the door against the cold. "Sit there," he said, motioning to the couch. He crossed to the kitchenette, filled a small pot with water, and set it on the stove. "You want something hot to drink?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper. "Cocoa, if you have it." "I always do." Ethan pulled down a dented tin of cocoa powder and smiled faintly. "Marine survival kit." While the water heated, he rummaged through a black medical pack that looked far too advanced for a civilian. Inside were sterile needles, bandages, IV lines, small glass vials of fluids, and a roll of gauze. His movements were precise, practiced. The military had trained him to stay calm in chaos, to find order where the world fell apart. He crouched beside the puppies. Scout wheezed, his tiny ribs rising and falling unevenly, while Daisy's head lolled weakly against Lily's palm. "They've got a bad infection," Ethan murmured. "Maybe pneumonia. We'll get fluids in them first, antibiotics next. Lily looked up at him, her big eyes glistening with a desperate mix of fear and hope. Can you save them? Ethan met her gaze. I'll try. He drew a small syringe, attached it to a saline line, and lifted Scout gently onto a folded towel. His hands were rough, scarred, but steady as stone. He spoke softly as he worked, not to the girl, not to himself, but to the animal in his hands. You're a tough one, aren't you? Marines respect that. Atlas, watching from the doorway, gave a low approving woof. When both pups had been hydrated, Ethan wrapped them in an old wool blanket and set them near a portable heater. The warmth filled the room slowly, chasing the chill from the air. He handed Lily a steaming mug of cocoa. She took it with both hands, her fingers barely big enough to fit around it. Thank you, she said, voice trembling. No one ever helps. Ethan leaned back on his heels, studying her. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, she was a pretty child. Heart-shaped face, freckles across her nose, eyes the color of a winter sky. But what struck him wasn't her appearance. It was her composure. She didn't cry, didn't beg. She simply sat there holding that mug, as if gratefulness itself was a fragile thing she didn't dare show too much of. He sat across from her on the worn couch. So, he said, you want to tell me what happened? She hesitated, staring at the dark window before speaking. I worked at that big house, the Rockwell mansion. Mrs. Rockwell said I could help the maids. I cleaned the floors and fed the dogs. There were so many. They bred them for rich people, I think. But Scout and Daisy, her voice caught. They said those two were weak. They wanted to drown them. I couldn't let them. Ethan's jaw tightened. So you took them. Lily nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I tried to get medicine. She caught me. Said I stole from her grandchild. She threw me out. Silence hung for a long moment, broken only by the heater's hum and Atlas's slow breathing. Ethan rubbed a hand across his face, feeling the old ache behind his ribs, the one that came whenever he saw cruelty disguised as order. He had seen villages burned in the name of discipline, children orphaned in the name of peace. That same logic had followed him home, dressed in finer clothes. Listen, he said finally, his tone gentler. You did the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing just costs more. Lily looked at him with that quick, sharp curiosity children have. You talk like you've done that before. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe I have. The conversation faded into the soft ticking of the heater. Lily curled up on the couch, Atlas lying beside her, his massive head resting near her knees. Ethan covered her with a blanket, careful not to wake her. The two puppies nestled close together, their breathing steadier now. He poured himself a cup of cocoa and stood by the window, watching the snow ease into silence. The city lights blurred through the frost, casting faint halos. His mind drifted to Marcus again, the friend who'd taken the bullet meant for him. Marcus had a saying, if you can't save everyone, save the one in front of you. Ethan exhaled slowly. Tonight, maybe that's what he was doing. From the couch came a small murmur. Lily was talking in her sleep, a child's whisper broken by exhaustion. Don't leave them. Please don't. Ethan turned, studying the fragile constellation of life gathered in his living room. A girl, two dying pups, a dog that had seen too much, and a soldier who'd forgotten what peace felt like. Outside, the storm had quieted, leaving the world covered in white. Inside, for the first time in years, Ethan felt something thaw. He switched off the light, leaving only the faint glow of the heater. Atlas lifted his head as Ethan passed. "Guard them," he said softly. Atlas's tail thumped once, firm and sure. Ethan smiled. "Good boy." As the Marine settled into his chair, the last of the wind died outside the window. In that stillness, surrounded by small, steady breaths, Ethan realized that the storm had carried more than snow to his doorstep. It had brought purpose. The night had turned cruel again. Snow drifted sideways across the windshield as Ethan sped through the empty streets of Boston, the truck's wipers thrashing against sheets of ice. Scout lay wrapped in an old army blanket on Lily's lap, his tiny body jerking in short spasms. Daisy whimpered beside him, pressing her muzzle into her brother's fur as if to lend him her own breath. Lily's face was pale in the dashboard light, lips trembling but eyes fixed forward with a courage far too old for her years. "Hold him steady," Ethan said, voice clipped but calm. He drove one-handed, the other gripping the steering wheel with knuckles white as bone. Atlas sat upright in the back, leaning forward between the seats, watching every movement with the intensity of a guardian angel made of muscle and fur. They reached the Charles River Veterinary Clinic, a low brick building half buried in snow. Its fluorescent sign flickered weakly against the storm. Inside, warmth hit them like a wall. The lobby was bright but sterile, the smell of antiseptic mingling with the faint tang of bleach and wet fur. Behind the reception desk stood Dr. Harper, a woman in her late 30s with kind eyes hidden behind square black glasses. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, dark auburn with strands escaping around her temples. There was a tired gentleness in her face, the look of someone who had seen too many creatures die in her hands, but still came to work, hoping for one more to live. She looked up as the door swung open and froze when she saw the Marine with the box. "Emergency?" she asked. Ethan nodded once. 6-week-old shepherd pup, seizing, respiratory distress. We need fluids, oxygen, and antibiotics, stat. Dr. Harper blinked at his precision. "You're military," she said quietly, already opening the side door to the treatment room. "Was," Ethan replied. "Now I'm just trying to save a dog." Lily followed, clutching Daisy against her chest. The stainless steel tables gleamed under the harsh lights. Machines beeped softly in the background. Harper took one look at Scout's limp body and began moving fast. "He's dehydrated. We'll start oxygen first." Her tone was professional, clipped, but not cold. She nodded to a young assistant, a thin man named Ben, maybe 20, with a nervous energy and hair that looked like he'd dried it with a car fan. He adjusted the oxygen mask, while Harper prepared a syringe. "Stay here, sweetheart," Harper told Lily. "He's in good hands." Lily sat on a plastic chair near the wall, holding Daisy tightly. The puppy licked her chin, tail twitching weakly. Ethan stood beside her, every muscle locked, his eyes following every move Harper made. His military calm was deceptive. Beneath it burned a fury at his own helplessness. Minutes passed. Then Harper looked up. "He's stabilizing, but his lungs are full of fluid. If we can keep his temperature up, he'll have a fighting chance." Ethan exhaled, shoulders loosening slightly. "Thank you." But peace lasted only seconds. As Harper stepped out to fetch antibiotics, Lily's gaze drifted toward the half-open office door near the reception desk. Voices murmured beyond it, low, clipped, and unmistakably urgent. "The Rockwells don't want loose ends, Pratt," said a man's voice, smooth but carrying steel beneath silk. Lily froze. She knew that voice. Mr. Richard Pratt, the Rockwells' personal attorney, a tall, silver-haired man with a permanent smirk and suits so sharp they looked like weapons. She remembered the day he'd come to the mansion, shaking hands with Evelyn Rockwell, talking about liabilities, while servants lowered their eyes. Another voice replied, "This one, Dr. Harper's, strained and small. They're just puppies, Richard. I can't—" "You can," Pratt interrupted. "And you will. The sick one. Let it go quietly. The other? A dosage error. Blame the girl. She's an orphan. No one will question it. The Rockwell's donations keep your clinic open, doctor. Don't grow a conscience now." Lily's fingers tightened around Daisy until the puppy whimpered. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The voices blurred. All she could hear was that single word. Kill. She ran. Ethan looked up just in time to see her skid across the tile, eyes wide, face ashen. "They're trying to kill them," she gasped. "That man, he's here. He told the doctor to let Scout die." Ethan didn't waste a second. He caught Harper by the arm as she re-entered, her expression panicked and guilty. "Is there a lawyer here named Pratt?" His tone was quiet, dangerous in its control. Harper swallowed hard. He's in the office. That's all I needed." He strode out of the treatment room, boots echoing on the tile, every inch of him radiating restrained violence. Atlas followed, hackles slightly raised but waiting for a command. In the lobby, Pratt stood near the reception counter, adjusting his cufflinks. He was in his 50s, tall, athletic, with slicked-back silver hair and a face too smooth for its age. His smile was thin and polished like glass. When Ethan appeared, Pratt's brows lifted in mild annoyance. "And you are?" "Someone who doesn't take orders from liars," Ethan said. Pratt gave a quiet laugh, the kind meant to belittle. "Mr. Miller, I presume? Former Marine? You should know better than to interfere with matters above your pay grade. These animals belong to my clients." "They don't belong to anyone now," Ethan replied, stepping closer. "And if I find out you've been paying off doctors to kill evidence, you'll find yourself explaining it to federal investigators." Pratt's smirk faltered just a fraction. "You have no idea who you're threatening." Ethan leaned in until they were inches apart. "Neither do you." Behind him, Atlas let out a single low growl, a sound like distant thunder. Pratt's face paled slightly. Without another word, he turned, muttering something about lawyers and lunatics, and walked out into the storm. Back inside, Harper stood shaking, her composure cracking. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "He's been funding the clinic for years. If I didn't—" "You did now," Ethan said quietly. "And that's what matters." Lily approached, clutching her phone, a cracked, outdated model with a pink plastic case. "I have proof," she said suddenly, voice trembling but sure. "From the Rockwell house. Pictures of their book, the one they made me write in. Names, dates, how many puppies they sold, and the ones they didn't." She handed the phone to Ethan. The screen glowed faintly, showing photographs of handwritten pages, columns of figures, names of buyers, and words scrawled in red ink. Culled, defective, discard. Ethan's stomach tightened. "Good girl," he said softly. They heard a car door slam outside, followed by the crunch of tires pulling away fast. Pratt was gone, but the danger wasn't. Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed a number buried deep in his memory. It rang once before a voice answered. "Noah Brooks," came the lazy drawl. "If you're calling after midnight, I'm assuming it's not for small talk." "Noah, it's Ethan. I need a favor, fast. Bring your laptop and your paranoia. Charles River Clinic. You've got 10 minutes. "Paranoia's already packed," Noah said. Exactly 10 minutes later, the door swung open to reveal Noah Brooks, a man in his early 30s with messy blonde hair, a week's worth of stubble, and a long army coat that looked like it had seen more bar fights than laundromats. His blue eyes were sharp, always scanning, the kind that never stopped calculating. Once, he'd been a reconnaissance analyst with Marine intelligence, until a betrayal inside his unit left his best friend dead and him discharged. Since then, he'd become a one-man digital fortress, hacking corporate corruption for cash and conscience. Jesus, Miller, Noah muttered, shaking snow from his coat. You always find trouble that's dressed in suits. He set a rugged laptop on the counter, fingers already flying across the keyboard. Let's see what Boston's finest philanthropists have been up to. Atlas padded over and planted one heavy paw on Noah's boot, eyes serious. Noah chuckled. All right, boss. I'm on it. The screens filled with lines of code, the faint hum of encrypted transfers filling the silence. Within minutes, Noah had tapped into the clinic's security system. Cameras are running. Audio too. If they try to erase anything, I've already backed it up. Pratt's phone pinged 3 calls to Evelyn Rockwell in the last hour. We've got them connecting the dots. Lily watched in awe, Daisy asleep in her lap. Ethan rested a hand on her shoulder. You did good, kid, he said quietly, and, for the first time, Lily smiled, a small, exhausted, but real smile. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside the clinic, the tide had turned. Scout's breathing steadied. Daisy's tail thumped faintly. Ethan looked at them and realized this wasn't just about saving 2 dogs anymore. It was about exposing a sickness much older and colder than the winter outside. Dawn came late to Boston that morning, dragging behind it the weary gray of a night that refused to end. Inside Ethan's apartment, the air was still, the faint hum of the heater blending with the soft breathing of the sleeping girl and the 2 small dogs beside her. Atlas lay near the doorway, head resting on his paws, ears twitching to every sound beyond the walls. He was half asleep, but vigilance was woven into his bones. Then the knock came. Hard, impatient, violent. 3 heavy blows that made the picture frame above the couch tremble. Ethan was on his feet instantly. The Marine in him never truly slept. He crossed the small living room in silence, motioning for Atlas to stay low. Lily stirred on the couch, eyes blinking open in confusion. It's okay, Ethan whispered, placing a hand on her shoulder. Stay with Atlas. The knocking came again, louder this time, followed by a barked voice. Boston PD, open up! We have a warrant for Ethan Miller and an accomplice, Lily Carter, on suspicion of theft and obstruction. Ethan approached the door, his muscles tense beneath the gray t-shirt he had thrown on. He opened it a few inches, just enough for the light from the hallway to reveal the face of Captain Doyle, the man leading the squad. Doyle was in his 50s, heavy-set, his jowls flushed with cold and ego. His uniform strained against his belly, and his tie was so tight it looked like it was strangling him. His cap, a polished navy blue with a gold badge that gleamed in the weak light, sat slightly crooked on his head. He had the practiced sneer of a man used to being obeyed, and the dull eyes of someone who'd long since stopped caring why. Captain Doyle, Ethan said evenly, his voice calm but edged with warning. You have a warrant? Doyle held up a folded paper, shaking it like a trophy. Right here. Signed and sealed. Now step aside. Ethan didn't move. Atlas rose behind him, a low growl vibrating through the doorframe. The officers behind Doyle shifted uneasily, their hands hovering near their holsters. Ethan kept his tone level. You're making a mistake. I'm an active-duty Marine, on leave but under federal jurisdiction. The people inside this residence are under my protection. If you want to step through that door, you'll be entering a legal mess that reaches the Pentagon." Doyle's smirk twitched. "You think the Marines can save you from a theft charge, hero?" "I think," Ethan said, "you should call the Judge Advocate General's office and ask them how they feel about local cops breaking into a military residence." For a moment, only the wind filled the hallway. Then Doyle noticed the small black camera above the door, its red light blinking steadily. What he didn't know was that it was already live streaming to multiple encrypted servers, courtesy of Noah Brooks, who was sitting on the couch with his laptop open, one eyebrow raised. "You're on record, Captain," Noah said without looking up, his voice lazy but lethal. "You sure you want to go through with this? Federal obstruction charges make terrible headlines." Doyle's color drained. He took a slow step back, forcing a laugh that sounded like it hurt his throat. "You're all playing with fire. When this blows up, don't say I didn't warn you." Ethan shut the door gently but firmly. "Mistake," he said through the wood, "is turning your back on the truth." Inside, the tension broke like ice cracking on a river. Lily hugged Daisy tighter, her voice small. "Are they going to take me?" Ethan crouched in front of her, his eyes steady. "Not while I'm breathing." 20 minutes later, the knock came again. But this time it was different. 3 firm raps, measured and authoritative. Ethan opened the door cautiously and froze at the sight before him. Standing in the corridor were 4 agents in black tactical jackets marked FBI, their badges catching the first glint of dawn. At their head was Special Agent Maria Sandoval. Maria was in her early 40s, tall and composed, her dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. Her olive skin bore the faint freckles of someone who spent years under foreign suns. She had sharp brown eyes, the kind that noticed everything, and a voice that carried quiet authority. She'd built her reputation in the Bureau's Organized Crime and Animal Cruelty Task Force, earning the nickname Iron Mercy for her ability to show compassion without ever bending the law. "Mr. Miller," she said, flashing her credentials. "Agent Sandoval, FBI. We received your data packet and video transmission. Mind if we come in?" Ethan stepped aside without hesitation. "You're right on time." Noah stood, stretching, a grin tugging at his lips. "Federal cavalry. I knew that upload would work." Maria's eyes swept the room, Lily on the couch, the sleeping dogs, Atlas watching her with cautious intelligence. She nodded once, impressed. "Good containment. We've already secured a warrant for the Rockwell property. Our team's moving on Beacon Hill as we speak." "Fast work," Ethan said. "We don't drag our feet when animals or kids are involved," Maria replied. Across the city, the Rockwell mansion was no longer a fortress of wealth, but a hive of panic. Under the gray morning light, black SUVs lined the street, their tires hissing against the melting snow. Inside, Evelyn Rockwell shouted orders to no one listening, while her husband, Howard Rockwell, a tall man with thinning blonde hair and the perpetually pale complexion of someone allergic to truth, frantically shredded papers. "They can't prove anything," he barked, even as FBI agents filled the hallway. Back at the clinic, Dr. Harper was signing her statement with trembling hands, her glasses fogged from tears. Pratt, the Rockwell lawyer, sat across from her, pale as parchment, a small recording device blinking red in front of him. "You recorded me," he hissed. Maria's second-in-command, Agent Curtis Vaughn, a stocky man with a shaved head and a gentle Boston accent, shrugged. Technically, you recorded yourself, counselor. You were just generous enough to do it near one of our microphones. Maria reviewed the files Noah had compiled. Footage of Pratt's visit, the ledger, the audio of his threats. She turned to Ethan. You did good work, Marine. Holding the line isn't always about pulling a trigger. Ethan nodded, eyes tired but clear. Sometimes it's about standing still until help gets there. Maria smiled faintly. You've got that right. She turned to Lily, her expression softening. You're very brave, sweetheart. What you did will save a lot of lives. Lily looked down at her hands. I didn't want them to hurt anyone else. They won't, Maria promised. Hours later, as dawn brightened into morning, news stations across Boston crackled with reports of the FBI raid. The Rockwells were in custody, the illegal breeding operation exposed, and the clinic secured as a key witness site. Outside Ethan's apartment, snow melted into thin rivulets that ran along the curb, like the city itself was thawing. Inside, Scout stirred for the first time in hours, opening his eyes and letting out a small, hopeful yip. Lily gasped, tears shining in her eyes as she hugged him gently. Ethan smiled, the hard lines of his face softening. Looks like someone decided to fight. Noah clapped him on the shoulder. Told you, man. You attract strays with 9 lives. Ethan chuckled quietly. Guess that makes me responsible for keeping them alive. Maria gathered her papers, heading for the door. We'll take it from here, but something tells me this isn't the last time we'll be working together. She extended her hand. Ethan shook it firmly. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt oddly peaceful. The world outside might still be messy, but inside there was warmth, hard-earned, but real. Lily curled up beside the 2 puppies, Atlas resting his head near her knees. Ethan leaned back, exhaling slowly. For once, the silence felt safe. Justice, he thought, didn't always roar. Sometimes it just knocked quietly, and this time, someone answered. A month later, Boston had softened. The bitter edges of winter were fading, replaced by air that still held a chill but carried the scent of thawed earth. Sunlight spilled over the old red bricks of Jamaica Plain, pale and thin like a silver coin. The snowbanks had shrunk into muddy seams along the curbs, and the trees, bare but defiant, whispered with the first promise of buds. Life, as it always did, was beginning again. Lily Carter now lived in a small apartment above a bakery whose morning aroma filled the stairwell with the smell of cinnamon and warmth. The Witness Protection Service had given her a new guardian, a woman named Sarah Lind, to stay nearby. Sarah was in her early 40s, tall and lean, with kind hazel eyes that always seemed to study before speaking. Her short brown hair was streaked with early silver, a mark of both wisdom and fatigue. She had once worked as a child therapist, but left the field after losing her only son in an accident years ago, a grief that still lingered in the quiet precision of her movements. Yet around Lily, Sarah found herself softening again, smiling in ways she thought she had forgotten. Every morning, Lily took the bus to the New England Shepherd Rescue Center, a converted barn on the edge of town that smelled faintly of hay, antiseptic, and second chances. There, under the guidance of Mr. Aaron Walsh, she learned how to feed, medicate, and comfort the rescued dogs. Aaron was a retired firefighter in his 50s, broad-shouldered but gentle, with the weathered hands of a man who had carried both people and flames. His beard was flecked with gray, and his laugh, deep and sudden, came from a heart that had learned to endure loss and still find joy. He had an easy affection for Lily, teasing her with the patience of a father. You clean kennels better than most rookies I've hired, Aaron said one morning, handing her a pair of gloves. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were raised by dogs. Maybe I was, Lily replied with a grin. Atlas says I have potential. Aaron chuckled, shaking his head. If Atlas talks to you, tell him I've got an opening for a night guard. Scout and Daisy had grown fast. Scout, once the fragile pup with a rattle in his chest, now bounded across the training field like a storm given fur and legs. His coat had darkened to a deep sable, his ears finally standing straight. Daisy, smaller and lighter, had the mischievous gleam of a dog who understood the effect of her own charm. Her coat shone golden brown, her gait quick and feather-light. Daisy no longer lived at the center. Noah Brooks had taken her home after the case was closed. Noah's house, a cluttered second-floor loft filled with computer parts, books, and unwashed coffee mugs, had become strangely lively since Daisy's arrival. The once quiet hacker, whose life revolved around screens and shadows, now found himself jogging in the mornings, laughing when Daisy stole his socks or tripped him mid-run. I'm telling you, Noah had said over the phone one night, this dog is better therapy than any shrink. She's got a bark that resets my hard drive. Back in Boston, Ethan Miller was preparing to deploy again. The case had made him something of a quiet hero in the Marine community, though he had deflected the attention with his usual humility. The truth was simpler. Service was the only language he knew. Yet before leaving, he made one last stop at Jamaica Plain. Lily was cleaning Scout's water bowl when she heard the knock. She opened the door to find Ethan standing there in uniform, his tan fatigues crisp, his duffel bag slung across his shoulder. He looked stronger somehow, but also calmer, like a man who had finally made peace with the ghosts that had followed him home. Hey, soldier, he said with a smile, lowering his voice to match hers. Hey, Marine, she replied, trying to stand straighter the way he'd taught her. Scout wagged his tail furiously and pressed his muzzle against Ethan's leg. Ethan knelt, running a hand along Scout's back. You look good, buddy. You keep watching her, all right? Scout barked once as if in reply. When Ethan stood, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small key ring. This is for you, he said. It was the spare key to his apartment, the one on Tremont Street. If you ever need a place to go, if things ever get hard again, that place will always be open. Lily stared at the keys in her palm as if they were made of gold. But what if you need it? Ethan smiled. I've got plenty of roofs. You only need one. Atlas stepped forward then, pressing his wet nose into Lily's hand. He was older now. 10 years had settled into his joints, but his eyes still burned with the steady light of loyalty. He looked between Ethan and Lily and gave a small, approving huff, as if to seal the exchange with a soldier's oath. That night, Ethan shared dinner with them. Soup, bread, and laughter. Sarah joined, bringing a pot of chicken stew that filled the kitchen with the smell of rosemary and memory. She watched Ethan with a quiet, knowing respect. She had seen men like him before, men who carried the weight of too many promises. Later, when the dishes were washed and Scout had curled up at Lily's feet, Ethan rose. I should go, he said softly. Lily followed him to the door. Will you come back? He looked down at her, this small girl who had walked through a storm and come out stronger than most grown men. Yeah, he said. People who keep promises always do. She stood straighter then and gave him the sharpest salute her small hands could manage. Good luck, Sergeant Miller. Ethan chuckled. Not bad. Only 20% off regulation. Atlas barked once, tail wagging. Ethan ruffled Lily's hair. "You saved them, Lily," he said quietly. "And maybe you saved me too." He turned and stepped out into the spring night, the air cool and full of possibility. The street lamps reflected in puddles along the sidewalk, small fragments of light stretching toward the sky. From the doorway, Lily watched until he disappeared into the mist, her hand still curled around the keys. Weeks later, a letter arrived. Inside was a single photograph: Ethan in desert fatigues, smiling beside Atlas and a group of soldiers, the horizon behind them endless and bright. On the back were just 7 words, written in his neat, deliberate handwriting. "Boston winters are harsh, but kindness lasts." Lily pinned the photo above her desk at the rescue center. Every time she fed a new dog, brushed its fur, or whispered a name into its ear, she looked up at it and remembered. The storm had ended, but its lessons remained. And in that quiet rhythm of work, she found what Ethan had been trying to teach her all along. That family wasn't just who you were born to. It was who stayed beside you when the world froze over. Sometimes miracles don't arrive with thunder or shining light. Sometimes they come quietly, through a soldier who opens his door, a child who refuses to give up, or a loyal dog who guards the last bit of hope when the night is cold. In moments like these, you realize God doesn't always part the seas. He warms hearts. He sends kindness disguised as people, and he whispers, "You are not alone." If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who still believes in goodness. Leave a comment to tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the next story of faith, love, and courage. May God bless you, protect your family, and remind us all that miracles still walk quietly among us, sometimes on 4 paws.